The boar came out of the brush without warning, low and fast, tusks catching the light, the ground shaking under it. Between the animal and the boy stood an orc, her back to the beast, her body folded over the child. The rifle came up. One shot. The boar dropped, and the scrub went quiet. What happened after that would take the rest of his life to understand. He had been alone for 2 years by the time that morning came. The homestead sat at the edge of the open country, where the scrub gave way to long dry grass, and the ridge cut a clean line against the sky. The fence needed work. It had needed work when he bought the place, and he had fixed the worst of it, 3 rails out of every 4. But the 4th rail he kept putting off. The roof over the lean-to had a soft spot near the corner. He knew where to step and where not to. The weld rope had frayed at the top, and he had spliced it himself, and it held, but he didn't trust it the way he used to. He had learned the place the way a man learns a piece of ground he intends to keep. Slowly, then by habit. After Clara died, the habit was all that was left. The tin cup she had used still sat on the shelf above the stove. He had not moved it. He didn't talk about her. He went to town when he had to, and came back when he could. 2 hours by horse, both ways. He hunted. He sold hides and kept what meat he needed. He repaired things when they broke, and sometimes before. He could split a rail clean. He could set a post or splice a rope without thinking about it. He wasn't waiting for anything. He had stopped waiting the winter after she died, and that had been the right thing to do, even if it hadn't felt like a decision at the time. Some men fall apart when they lose someone. He had not fallen apart. He had gotten very quiet instead, and the quiet had settled around him like silt in a still pond, and after a while he stopped noticing it. The dog had died the winter before last. He hadn't replaced her. The morning of the boar was an ordinary morning. The sky above the ridge was the color of ash. The first birds were up, but not many. The grass stood pale and still. He was up before first light. He built the fire small and stood at the cabin door for a long time, watching the dark thin out over the ridge. It was cold without malice. Just wait. He finished his coffee and pulled his coat on, and checked the rifle and stepped out. He did this every morning that was fit for it. Frost on the grass, not yet light enough to see it, but he could feel the crunch under his boots. He moved along the fence line out of habit, checking for gaps, and then through the gate and north along the ridge where the game trail ran. There was no wind. The land held still the way it does before a thing happens. He was tracking a doe. He had found her sign the day before, fresh prints in the soft earth near the creek. He moved without hurrying. Hurry was the thing that cost you most out here. You could miss a shot by breathing wrong. You could miss a whole season by wanting it too fast. He followed the trail down into the scrub where the brush came up thick, and the light went thin and greenish, and the world got small. He heard the creek before he saw it. He stopped. And then the boar. He heard them before he saw them. Not voices, just weight on the ground, the kind of footfall that belongs to something large. He went still and waited. They came through the scrub at the edge of the creek, moving south along the water. 2 of them. The larger one first, then the small one close behind. He had seen orcs before. Twice, at a distance. He had not spoken to either of them. He knew what most men knew. They were tall, they kept to themselves, and the world didn't make room for them when it could help it. What he had not understood, from a distance, was the size of them. Not just tall. Tall the way a standing stone is tall. The woman moved with her shoulders back and her head up, scanning the far bank, and she was taller than any man he had seen in his life. taller than the brush she moved through. Her arms were long, and her hands were large, and her dark hair was pulled back from her face and tied. Her face was broad-jawed and still. Not the stillness of calm, the stillness of someone deciding what to do next. She walked like she had walked a long way and intended to walk farther. The boy was shorter than her hip. He was picking his way over the roots with both hands out for balance. He had the same dark hair and the same straight-ahead look, and he said something short to her, and she didn't answer. He had stopped watching for the doe. Then the boar came out of the scrub on the far side of the creek, 30 yards uphill, and it was not looking at him. It was looking at the boy. It was a big animal. 150 pounds at least, maybe more, the tusks ivory and curled, and it was already moving, not charging yet. Trotting, head low, ears flat. The sound of it was low and constant, a grunt that didn't stop. Birds went up off the water. The orc woman heard it. She turned. She did not run. She put herself between the animal and the child. She turned her back to the boar and bent her body over the boy, covering him, her arms wide, her shoulders braced. The boy went still beneath her. The boar's trot became a charge. He raised the rifle. He didn't think about it. He breathed out and found the point behind the animal's ear and squeezed. The shot cracked out across the water, and the boar dropped mid-stride, its legs folding under it, and it slid in the soft earth and stopped 6 feet from where they stood. The scrub went quiet. He did not move. He stood at the edge of the water with the rifle still up, the smoke curling from the muzzle into nothing, and he watched them. She had not moved either. She was still bent over the child, still covering him, braced for something that had not come. Then she felt the stillness. She straightened, slowly, by degrees, and looked at the boar. Then she looked across the creek. She found him right away. He hadn't hidden. She was looking at the rifle, then at his face, then at the rifle again. He had not lowered it yet. Between them was the dead boar and 15 feet of cold water and nothing else. The boy turned his head. He looked at the boar, then he looked across at the man on the other bank, and something shifted in his face. Not fear, just attention. He stepped out from under his mother's arm and crouched beside the dead animal and touched one of the tusks with 2 fingers. The rifle came down. Nobody spoke. The creek ran. He looked at the boy's hand on the tusk. He looked at the woman. She had not looked away from his face. She straightened all the way up. She looked at the boar first and then at the boy. She put her hand on his head for a moment, and then moved it away. The boy was watching the man across the creek. The hunter had not moved. She looked at him. Not at the rifle, at him. She took her time about it. He could feel the assessment from across the water, the way you feel the weather shift before the wind picks up. There was no gratitude in it, no warmth, just a long look from someone who was deciding something, and who had decided before on things that hadn't gone well. He didn't rush her. He had no reason to rush her. What he had done was over. The boar was dead. The boy was standing. The shot had cost him 1 cartridge and part of the morning, and whatever came next was a separate matter from what he had done, and he didn't know yet what it was. She said nothing. He said nothing. A bird called once from somewhere downstream. Neither of them moved. The creek ran between them. The scrub had gone quiet after the shot, and it stayed quiet. A long stillness that was not comfortable but was not threatening either. Just the 2 of them, across 15 feet of cold water. Neither one prepared to explain themselves. The boy was the one who moved first. He had crouched beside the boar, and he crouched there a while longer, looking at it, turning the edge of one tusk in his fingers, the way a child will handle a strange object before anyone tells him to put it down. And then he stood and looked at the man on the far bank and said something, not a question, more like a statement. The way children name what they see just to confirm it is there. The mother did not look at him when he spoke. She did not correct him. The hunter took his eyes off the woman long enough to look at the boy. Then he looked back at her. He lowered the rifle. Not fast. Slowly, by the same small degrees that she had straightened, and he pointed the barrel at the ground and let his arm settle and stood with it there. Then he took one step back, away from the water's edge. That was all. No words. No open hand. Just the rifle down and one step back. She watched him do it. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't look away. She kept watching him the way a person watches a fire they are not sure of to see whether it will spread. She had seen enough fires. The woman looked at the ground for a moment, then back at him. She did not move toward the water. He waited another moment. Then he turned. He walked north along the bank, back the way he had come in the morning, back toward the gate and the fence line and the homestead on the ridge. He didn't look behind him. He didn't slow. He walked at the same pace he always walked out here, steady and without hurry. And the only difference was that the doe was still somewhere in the scrub, and he was going home without her. He crossed back over the creek at the shallows 50 yards up, where the stones let you step across without getting wet, and he went up the far bank and through the gap in the brush and into the open scrub and didn't look back. The land behind him said nothing. The land ahead of him said nothing. He had learned not to expect it to. He walked. She did not move for a long time after he was gone. The scrub closed over the far bank, and there was nothing to see. Just the creek, and the dead boar and the flies coming in, and the boy crouched at the animal's side with the tusk gripped in both hands, working at the jaw joint, patient the way children are when they have decided they want something, and no one has told them they can't have it. She let him alone. She was watching the place on the far bank where the hunter had gone through the brush. The water ran. The scrub was the same as it had been before the shot. A bird came down and settled on a rock midstream and sat there and then was gone. She stood with her arms at her sides and waited until she knew what she was going to do. She had stood at enough doorways to know what they cost. She had also stood in enough open country to know when she had run out of road. She looked at the boy. He had the tusk free. He was holding it in both hands, already done deliberating. She reached down and took his free hand, and they walked. She followed the hunter's trail by the boot prints in the soft earth and the bent grass, north along the bank, and then through the shallows where the stones let her cross without losing her footing, and up the far bank, and out through the gap in the brush into the open country where the ridge came in from the east, and the sky went wide, and the grass ran flat in every direction, and there was nothing moving in it, except them. The homestead came into view on a low rise, a fence, new rails mixed in with old ones. Behind it a cabin set back from the gate, and against the cabin's near wall a lean-to with a bark and board roof, a well with a rope to the side. In front of the door, a fire already going, the smoke rising straight in the still afternoon air. He was feeding it when they came through the long grass to the fence. He had heard them well before he looked up. He kept feeding the fire. When he did look up, she was at the gate. He crossed the yard and lifted the latch and let the gate stand open and went back to the fire without a word. He did not watch to see if she came through. He waited for the sounds. A long moment passed. Then the gate creaked on its hinge, and then it shut. He did not look up. She came to a stop on the near side of the fire. The boy was at her hip. He stood and walked to the lean-to at the cabin wall. The roof was board and bark, thick enough to keep rain off. It had held through 2 winters without any trouble worth mentioning. He looked at it briefly, the way a man looks at a thing he is about to hand over. "There's a lean-to," he said. "Keeps rain off." She said nothing for a moment. "We've slept worse," she said. That was all. No arrangement named. No welcome given or received. Just the 2 of them and the boy on the same ground, the fire between them and the gate latched behind her. He went back to the fire. The boy found a flat stone by the lean-to wall. He set the tusk down on it and crouched beside it, and was still looking at it when the light began to thin. The woman noticed. She said nothing. The tusk stayed where it was. The first morning he was up before she was. He left food on the flat stone by the lean-to, dried meat and a heel of bread, and he went out the gate without looking back. When he came in at midday, the food was gone. She was at the lean-to door looking at something in the middle distance. He did not ask about it. She did not say anything either. He had not expected her to. He built the fire for the evening meal and cooked what there was, and divided it, and set her portion on the flat stone and went inside. He did not watch to see if she came for it. There was a long quiet while the fire burned down. When he went out in the morning, the stone was clean. The next day the boy followed him. He was at the south fence line when the boy came through the gate and stopped a few yards back and watched him, not asking to help, not announcing he was there. Just there, the way the boy seemed to arrive at things, already decided, and waiting for the situation to catch up with him. He had the tusk under his arm. He picked up a fence rail and started walking it to the gap in the south corner. The boy set the tusk down in the grass and grabbed the far end of the rail. He wasn't strong enough to carry it. The wood dragged on the ground, and he kept adjusting his grip, but he didn't let go. When they were done, the boy picked the tusk up out of the grass and put it back under his arm. They set 3 rails that morning. He cut new pegs. The boy held the mallet when he wasn't using it. He let him. From the lean-to door the woman watched. She stayed where she was. He could see her in his peripheral vision when he wasn't looking at the fence, standing with her arms crossed and her shoulders straight, her eyes moving between the boy and his hands and the gate at the far end of the yard, and then back to the boy. She was counting distances and counting exits. He didn't blame her for it. It was what he would have done. Nobody said anything about it. On the 3rd day, he got up on the lean-to roof before the light was fully up. The bark layer had lifted on the northeast corner and let light through when the wind was up. It wasn't letting water in yet, but come autumn it would. He cut new shingles from the woodpile and climbed up with them, and the bark pry and the mallet, and worked his way across the corner section by section, lifting the old pieces and bedding the new ones flat and tight. He was up there for most of the morning. When he came down, the boy was standing at the base of the lean-to, looking up at where he had been working. He had the tusk in both hands. "Did it fall down?" the boy said. "Not yet," he said. "Won't now." The boy looked at the corner of the roof for a moment. Then he looked at the tusk. He turned it once and set it back on its stone. She had heard it. She was at the lean-to door. She hadn't moved when the boy spoke, and she didn't move now. She looked at the roof corner for a long moment, then at him. He picked up his tools and went to put them away. 3 days. Nothing settled. Nothing broken. That was something. On the 4th day, she picked up the fence post he was about to set. She didn't ask. She didn't look at him when she did it. She just stepped in and lifted the post out of the dirt where he had set it aside and walked it to the hole he had dug and dropped one end in and held it plumb. No ceremony. Just done. He looked at her for a moment. Then he got the mallet. They worked the fence line through the morning without speaking. She was stronger than him by a margin that he didn't comment on, and she knew what to do with a post hole, which he also didn't comment on. The posts went in square. By midday they had done twice what he could have done alone. She did not seem tired. When they stopped, he went inside and brought out bread and set it on the flat stone. She took her portion. The boy took his. They ate standing, apart from each other, not together yet. He noticed the scrape on the boy's arm on the 5th day. It was along the outside of his forearm, below the elbow, dried over but not cleaned. The kind of thing that happens when a child falls hard on rough ground and then doesn't mention it for several days, because there are more pressing things. It would heal on its own, but not clean. He didn't say anything. He went inside and came back with water in a small bowl and a piece of cloth and set them on the flat stone. The woman looked at what he had put out, then at the boy, then at him. He held her look for a moment and went back to the fire and didn't watch. She cleaned the scrape herself. He could hear the boy's complaint from across the yard, the same sound children make when someone is being thorough about something they'd rather not sit still for. It didn't last long. The woman said one short word, and the boy went quiet. That evening she moved her seat 3 feet closer to the fire than she had sat the night before. He noticed. He said nothing about it. The 6th day the problem was a torn canvas panel on the water barrel cover. It had been split at the seam for a week. He had needle and thread. His hands were large and not patient, and not made for small work. He tried 3 times, and the stitches went in crooked, and the canvas puckered, and it would let water through worse than before if he finished it the way he was going. She took the needle from him. She didn't ask. She just reached over when he set it down and took it, held the canvas flat with her other hand, and put the stitches in straight. She finished the row and knotted the end off and handed it back. He looked at it. "Better," he said. She said nothing. She had already gone back to the fire. On the 7th evening he cooked enough for 3. He did not announce it. He just put 3 portions out when the food was ready, on the flat stone and the 2 pieces of split wood he used for seats, and sat down without looking to see if anyone would follow. The boy came first. Then the woman, after a moment. She sat at the far edge of the fire and did not look at him while they ate. Nobody said anything. The fire was the fire. The food was the food. When they were done, she took the bowls and cleaned them at the water barrel and stacked them. He said nothing. She said nothing. It was the first time. The fire was the same fire it had been for 2 years. The company was not. The boy was asleep by the time the fire got low. He had gone down gradually, the way children do when they are not fighting it, his head drooping first and then the rest of him following, until he was on his side in the lean-to doorway, with his knees pulled up, and one hand resting near the tusk on the stone beside him. He had not let go of it exactly. He had set it down in the right place and then let himself fall, knowing it was there. The woman had laid a piece of canvas over him. Then she came back to the fire and sat. Not at the far edge, 3 feet closer than the first night, and her back not to the gate the way it had been then, but to the cabin wall. She looked at the fire the way she looked at most things, straight at it, and without performance. He looked at the fire too. The quiet between them was not the same quiet it had been in the first days. Then the silence had edges. Now it did not. It had the weight of time and work and shared meals, the kind of silence that builds between people not because there is nothing to say, but because they have run out of reasons to fill the space with noise. It was not comfortable, exactly, but it was not hostile either. A log shifted. Sparks went up and died before they reached the dark. He had not planned to say anything. "Her name was Clara," he said. "2 winters ago." He kept his eyes on the fire when he said it. He had not said her name out loud in a long time. He had thought it every day, the way you think a word until it loses its shape and then gets it back somewhere unexpected. But he had not said it to another person, and saying it now was different from thinking it in a way he didn't have words for. It just sat there, in the air above the fire, between them. She said nothing right away. The fire burned. The scrub around the homestead was quiet. "We had a home," she said. "They burned it. He didn't get out." She said it the same way he had said Clara's name. Plain. Not asking for anything back from it. Not looking at him when she said it. Just setting it down in the open, where it could be seen by anyone who wanted to see it, and leaving it there. He looked at her. She was watching the fire. He did not say he was sorry. He did not ask what happened or who they had been. He had not wanted her to ask him either, and she hadn't. And there was something clean about that. He had been carrying it alone long enough that he knew what it weighed. He thought maybe she did too. The fire burned lower. He looked at the boy's hand, still near the tusk where he slept. The firelight moved across the ivory, and the tusk caught some of the orange and held it, and it looked older in that light than it had looked at the creek, older and heavier, the way a thing looks when it has started to mean more than what it is. It had been the boy's from the moment he picked it up. He saw that clearly now. Neither of them said anything about it. She did not put more wood on the fire. He did not either. The fire went down slowly, the way it always did, the way it had gone down for 2 years when he had been the only one watching it go, and the coals went red and then darker, and the night came in closer around them, and the boy's breathing was the only sound that moved. It was not trust, not yet. But something had moved, the way a stone moves when the water finally gets under it. 3 weeks passed. The fence was finished and something new had started. Along the south wall of the cabin, a raised bed had appeared, the soil turned and raked flat and left ready for seed. He had not asked for it. One morning it had simply been there, and the tools he would have used were set neatly along the wall beside it. Her things had settled into the lean-to the way a person's things settle when they have stopped planning to move them. A water skin he did not own hung from the nail beside the door. A folded piece of blanket he also did not own lay on the sleeping shelf beside the boy's boots, too small now, but the boy had argued with considerable authority that they were still good for sitting in. He kept them. His own boots stood beside them on the step. 3 sizes larger. The hunter's own things had shifted to make room, the way things shift when a place starts to be lived in differently than it was before. He had not planned it. It had happened the way most things at the homestead happened now, which was gradually and without announcement. The boy had claimed the morning fire. It had happened in the 2nd week. He had simply gotten up before the hunter one morning and built it, small and steady and right. And after that, it was his. He did it every morning, without being asked, and without missing it. He had his own way of building it, not identical to the hunter's, but not wrong either. Sometimes he got it going before first light, and then went back to sleep beside it, which was impractical, but also the hunter had decided his own concern. One afternoon he came in from the yard and said, "Where do we keep the bucket?" Not asking if there was a bucket, not asking whose it was, just asking where it lived. "On the nail by the well," the hunter said. The boy went and found it. Nobody said anything about the way he had asked. That evening the hunter came out at dusk and found the woman already at the fire. She was sitting with her back to the cabin wall and her face to the open yard, not to the gate, not to the gap in the south brush where you could move fast if you had to. Just the yard and the fire and the last light going off the ridge. He sat down on the far side. She did not shift to watch the gate. She did not check the path behind her. She just sat the way someone sits when they have decided a place is safe, which was not something you could see in a person's face. You could only see it in where they put their back. He did not say anything about it. 3 weeks. Not long enough to be certain of anything, but long enough. He noticed it most in the mornings, when he came out, and the fire was already going. He found the tusk when he was hanging tools on the inside wall of the lean-to. It was up on a peg near the top of the wall, a peg that had been empty since he built the place. The boy had looped a cord around the narrow end and hung it there so it sat level and still, the ivory pale against the dark wood. Not set down, not left out. Hung up, the way you hang something you intend to keep. He looked at it for a moment. Then he finished with the tools and went inside. Then the horses came. 1 rider, 1 horse. He came up the trail from the direction of town at mid-morning, moving at an easy walk, not hurrying, the kind of pace that says official business rather than anything that needs to arrive fast. The hunter was splitting wood in the yard when he heard the hooves on the hardpan, and he set the maul down against the block and waited. The rider came through the last of the scrub and into the clear and stopped at the gate. He was a man of middle age, broad across the chest, wearing a coat that had seen better years, but had been brushed, and a hat that sat straight on his head. He had a leather folder laid across the saddle in front of him. He took in the fence first, then the cabin, then the lean-to, then the garden bed along the south wall, with the first green rose starting up through the dark soil. He took his time. This was a man who had done this kind of visit before. Then he looked at the woman standing near the cabin door. He looked at her for a moment, and then he looked at the hunter. "Morning," he said. "Morning," the hunter said. "I'm the county land agent. I've had a report. Orcs on this property." He opened the folder. "I need to ask some questions." "Ask them," the hunter said. "How many? How long? What arrangement?" 2. Coming up on 5 weeks now. They work the place." The agent wrote something. He looked up at the woman again. She was looking at him. She had not moved from the cabin door, and she had not changed her expression, and she had not looked away. He held her look for a moment, and then looked back down at the folder. "She understand what we're saying," he said. "She understands," the hunter said. The woman stood at the door and did not speak. She did not need to. The agent looked up at her once more. She was still looking at him, the same way, flat and direct and patient. He looked away first. "Under county ordinance," he said, "orcs on private land require the owner's declaration of responsibility. I'll need your name on record." The hunter said his name. The agent wrote it down. He looked at the lean-to again, the tools racked along the wall, the tusk hanging on the far peg. He looked at the garden bed. "Anyone else on the property?" "Her son," the hunter said. "Boy." The agent looked at the far end of the yard where the boy was stacking the split wood into a neat row against the fence. The boy did not look up. "All right," the agent said. He closed the folder. "You understand I have to note this visit and report back to the county seat." "Note it," the hunter said. The agent gathered his reins and turned his horse, and went back down the trail at the same easy walk he had come in on. He did not look behind him. The boy looked up from the wood. "Who was that?" "Land agent," the hunter said. "Keep stacking." The boy kept stacking. The hunter stood at the gate for a while after the sound of the horse had gone from the trail. He looked down the road toward town. The road was empty. The day was quiet. It was the same road it had always been, and it was not the same road it had always been, and he understood the difference. The next visit would not be a note in a folder. The woman was behind him, 10 feet back, where she had been standing for the last hour of it. He did not say anything to her about it. He picked up the maul and went back to the wood. They came 3 days later. 3 riders this time, not one. They came up the trail at mid-morning at a canter, moving with the kind of purpose that has somewhere to be and a reason to get there. The hunter heard them from the far end of the field where he had been checking the fence, and he walked back through the gate and stood in the yard and waited. The woman was at the well. She heard them too. She did not move. The man at the front was not the land agent. He was older and heavier, and he rode like a man who owned things and had ridden out to look at them. He stopped his horse just outside the gate and looked at the homestead with the slow survey of someone who has already made up his mind and is now counting reasons. He looked at the garden bed. He looked at the lean-to. He looked at the woman at the well, and then at the hunter standing in the yard. He did not open a folder. He looked at the hunter the way you look at someone you have already decided not to like. "You the man who declared those orcs?" he said. "I am," the hunter said. "Joel Marsh. I represent the settlement committee for this county." He said it the way a man says something he has said many times and expects to say again. "We have an ordinance, 6 months on the books, that says orcs cannot take up residence within 5 miles of a settled township. Your property sits 3 miles out. You have a week to see them off." The hunter said nothing. He let Marsh finish. He let the silence sit a moment after. "Whose ordinance?" he said. Marsh looked at him. He had not expected that to be the question. "The settlement committees. I just told you. You said orcs can't take up residence. They're not residents. They work the property. I feed them for the work. That's a labor arrangement. Not residents." Marsh looked at the woman at the well. She had not moved, and she was not looking at him. She was watching something past his shoulder, the way a person watches when they do not want to be seen watching. He looked back at the hunter. "That's a thin line to stand on," Marsh said. "It's the line the ordinance drew," the hunter said. "Not me." Marsh's jaw set. He looked at the homestead again, slower than the first time. He looked at the lean-to, the tusk on the peg, the green rose in the garden bed. He looked at the boy at the corner of the cabin, watching him with the tusk cord hanging from his hand. "A week," Marsh said. "If they're still here, I bring men who settle it without a conversation first. I'm within my rights, and you know it." "I heard you," the hunter said. Marsh pulled his horse around. His 2 riders turned with him without a word. They went back down the trail at the same canter they had come in on, and the scrub closed behind them. The hunter stood at the gate and waited until there was no more sound of them on the trail. He turned. She was 3 steps behind him. She had been there the whole time, close enough that he was surprised he had not heard her move up. She was looking at him, flat and straight, waiting for something. He looked back at her the same way. There was nothing to say that the other had not already understood. The boy moved up beside him at the fence. He had taken the tusk down from its peg. He was holding it in his hand, the way he had held it in the first days. Not by the cord, but in the grip of it, like he had just picked it up from the ground. He did not say anything. The 3 of them stood at the fence. The trail ran empty back through the scrub. The afternoon went on. Then the men came back. He heard them before he saw them, more horses than before, and not coming at a walk. He was at the fire when the sound reached him, and he set his cup down and picked up the rifle from beside the door and walked out to the gate. The morning was still and clear. The sky had gone the color of ash at the edges and was brightening. The trail through the scrub was empty. He stood at the fence and waited. She came first. He had not asked her, and she had not asked him. He heard her cross the yard, and she moved up to the fence on his left and stood, shoulders level, hands at her sides. She did not ask what it was. She knew what it was. The boy came out of the lean-to with the tusk in his hand and crossed the yard and stood on the right side of the hunter. His chin was up. He did not say anything. The three of them were at the fence when the riders came through the gap in the scrub. 5 men this time. Marsh in front as before, but the men behind him were different men, and they rode differently. These had their hands lower and their faces set, and they spread a little as they came, the way men spread when they are expecting a different kind of conversation. They stopped at the gate. Marsh looked at the hunter. He looked at the rifle. He looked at the woman to the hunter's left. He had looked at her before, across the yard, with 30 feet of distance between them. She had been a shape in the background. Here she was, 6 feet from him, with her shoulders squared and her eyes on his face, and she was taller than he had understood from a distance. Not by a little. By enough to be a different kind of fact. The kind of fact that lives in the body rather than the head. He looked at her for a long moment. He looked at the rifle again. He looked at the boy on the other side of the hunter, standing straight with the tusk in both hands, looking back at him. He looked at the hunter. The hunter did not move. Not one of Marsh's men moved. Not one horse shifted. Not one hand went toward a weapon. The gate stood between them, latched, and the hunter's hand was on the post beside it, and he didn't open it, and he didn't step back from it. Marsh looked at the fence. He looked at the gate. He looked at the woman and the rifle and the boy and his own 5 men behind him, and then he looked at the hunter again, and something was working behind his face that had not been there when he rode up. He counted something. It did not come out right. Something moved across his face. Not fear exactly. The recognition that this was a different kind of ground than he had expected. He pulled his reins. "This isn't finished," he said. He turned his horse. His men turned with him one by one, and they went back down the trail at a walk, not a canter, and the scrub closed behind them, and after a while there was nothing on the trail and nothing to hear. The hunter stood at the fence until the last sound of them was gone. He lowered the rifle. The woman was still beside him. She had not moved, and she was not looking at him. She was looking at the place in the brush where they had gone. The birds that had gone up when the riders came in had not come back yet. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. The boy looked down at the tusk in his hands, and then up at the hunter, and the hunter looked at him, and that was all. The day went on. It was just a day. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came in by degrees, a warmer morning. The snow off the lower ground first, the upper ground following a week later. The well unfreezing without ceremony. One morning he walked out, and the mud was gone, and the ground was solid underfoot, and the sky was the clear, pale blue of early spring, and the garden bed along the south wall had something in it. Small green shoots, barely there, but there. He stood at the edge of the bed for a while and looked at them. She had planted it in the cold, he realized. She had planted it when the ground was still hard enough that getting seed in was real work. He did not say anything about it. The boy had started building a second lean-to off the north side of the cabin, working from scraps and downed timber from the winter. He had drawn plans in the dirt first, and consulted the hunter about the angle of the roof with the seriousness of someone who understood that angle and consequence were connected. They had spent the better part of a morning working that out. The lean-to was not finished yet, but it was started, and it was going to be right. The woman reset the fence posts that had slumped before winter. She had done it in the cold without asking, and the line ran straight now where it had sagged in 3 places. She was at the fence when he came out in the evenings, not watching the road the way she had watched it in the first weeks, not tracking the exits. Just standing in the late light the way a person stands in a place they have decided is theirs. He did not have a word for what they were to each other. Not quite a family. The word was too small, or too large. He wasn't sure. It was something that had no good name because it had been made out of unusual materials. A rifle shot on a creek trail, a gate left open, a child's question about a bucket. 2 names said aloud over a dying fire. What you made out of unusual materials didn't always fit the usual names. It was what it was. He had decided that was enough. The tusk was on the peg above the cabin door now. The boy had moved it there in the first week of spring without explanation. It was the first thing you saw when you came through the door. The ivory had darkened a little from handling, the way things darken when they are held often. The cord the boy had tied was starting to fray at the knot, and the hunter had thought about replacing it, and had not. He looked at it sometimes when he came in. Not in grief. Not exactly in gratitude. In the way you look at the thing that cracked a door open when everything else was going to stay closed. The shot had lasted a second. What came after had lasted longer. What was still going on was the proof of it. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving. He knew that. Marsh's parting words had not left him entirely, and he did not expect them to. There were things still unresolved, and he was not so gone into peace that he forgot it. But spring was here. The garden was growing. The lean-to was going up. The fire in the morning was the boy's fire. He went inside. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much.